Welcome to part 2 of Just a Little Prick, the unauthorized Bill Gates story. Obviously the term little prick refers to what happens when you have an injection and is naturally in no way meant in a pejorative way. Heaven forbid, if I were to be rude about Mr. Gates, his friends at The Guardian and the BBC would doubtless need to be revived with smelling salts. In the first episode of Just a Little Prick, I dealt with a few of Mr. Gates's connections, aspirations and investments. But I made it clear that he and his wife seem to have one first love: vaccines. Some people love cats, some people like mountain climbing, some people like horse racing, but Bill and Melinda Gates love vaccines. They yearn to inject everyone, and to them vaccines appear to be the eighth wonder of the world. I wouldn't be surprised if they spent their honeymoon watching vaccines being made or watching vaccinations being given to tiny African children. I bet they spend their evenings drooling over vials of vaccines, and at Christmas they probably give each other unusual vaccines which they've found. Unravelling the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and its links with the world of vaccines and vaccinations has taken weeks and given me a headache. Thank heavens there isn't a vaccination yet for headache. Among the many partnerships and so on which the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has developed in recent years, there's one with an organisation called Gavi. Now, Gavi is rather odd in that it's a partnership between the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the World Health Organization, which is itself very well financed by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the World Bank and a variety of other bodies. So, for example, Gavi also has close and loving partnerships with what I think are some of the world's dirtiest, biggest and most disreputable multinational drug companies, including GlaxoSmithKline and Pfizer. Perhaps not surprisingly, the organisation Doctors Without Borders has, I think, criticised Gavi, alleging that large multinational drug companies working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation put high markups on their prices, and that Gavi spends oodles of money subsidising large companies. One of Gavi's stated aims seemed to be to create a healthy market for vaccines. You'll probably not be surprised to hear that Gates has close links with a number of multinational drug companies, but you may or may not be surprised to hear that he doesn't seem to me to be terribly fussy about the company he keeps. On the other hand, it would, I suppose, be quite difficult to find a drug company partner that didn't have a reputation that would make Al Capone blush with shame. If you get into bed with a drug company, you have to be prepared to wake up in the morning with a bit of scratching and itching and so on. In a previous video entitled "Would You Trust These People with Your Life?", I detailed some of the bad things that GSK has done over recent years, and I pointed out that if it were a human being, GSK would be described as a recidivist. It would probably have regular appointments with a parole officer. GSK is one of the world's biggest pharmaceutical companies, and in my view, if it made teaspoons, you'd need to be a special sort of person to buy a teaspoon from them. In 2014, for example, GSK was fined $490 million by China after a Chinese court found it guilty of bribery. The court gave GSK's former head of Chinese operation a suspended prison sentence, and they gave suspended prison sentences to other executives too. Sadly, that misadventure in China wasn't GSK's only little "oh dear, whoops, how did that happen" mistake. Here are some others. In 2009, in Canada, a 5-year-old girl died 5 days after an H1N1 flu shot, and her parents sued GSK for $4.2 million. The parents' lawyer alleged that the drug was brought out quickly and without proper testing, as the federal government exerted intense pressure on Canadians to get immunised. In 2010, GSK paid out $1.14 billion because of claims over a drug called Paxil, and they settled lawsuits over a drug called Avandia for $500 million. In 2011, GSK paid $250 million to settle 5,500 death and injury claims and set aside $6.4 billion for future lawsuits and settlements in respect of the drug Avandia. And then there are the accusations of fraud, misbranding and failure to report safety data. In 2012, GSK GSK pleaded guilty to federal criminal offences, including misbranding of 2 antidepressants and failure to report safety data about a drug for diabetes to the FDA in America. The company admitted to illegally promoting Paxil for the treatment of depression in children and agreed to pay a fine of $3 billion. GSK also reached a related civil settlement with the US Justice Department. The $3 billion fine also included the civil penalties for improper marketing of half a dozen other drugs. There's more interesting stuff about GSK on my video entitled "Would You Trust These People with Your Life?" Oh, and there's a couple of other things you should know about GSK. First, GSK is one of the top-earning vaccine companies in the world, and in 2010 there were reports of narcolepsy occurring in Sweden and Finland among children who had the H1N1 swine flu vaccine. It's reported that not all the safety problems were made public. In Ireland, the Irish government kept inviting people to get vaccinated, even when it was clear that the pandemic was on the wane and it was nowhere near the catastrophe portrayed by influenza researchers, governments, industry and the media. One member of the Irish Parliament told the Irish Prime Minister the Health Service executive decided to purchase Plandemic and continued to distribute it even after they knew it was dangerous and untested. It's perhaps worth noting that Professor Neil Ferguson, the Eddie the Eagle of mathematical modelling, though perhaps without the innocence and patriotic charm, had predicted that the swine flu could lead to 65,000 deaths in the UK alone. In the end, the swine flu killed 457 people and had a death rate of just 0.026% of those infected. Just another of Ferguson's cock-ups. Cock-ups seem to be a speciality of his in more ways than one. Second, Sir Patrick Vallance is the chief scientific advisor in the United Kingdom and, I suspect, a key figure in dealing with the coronavirus in the UK and plans for a vaccine. Vallance worked for GSK between 2006 and 2018, and by the time he left GSK he was a member of the board and the corporate executive team. Fines and so on, which I've listed, took place while Vallance was working as a senior figure at GSK. As I say, you can find out lots more exciting stuff about GSK and about another drug company in my video entitled "Would You Trust These People with Your Life?" If the video disappears, you can, as always, find the transcript on my website, www.vernoncoleman.com. Oh, and there's one more thing I nearly forgot to mention. GlaxoSmithKline was fined £37.6 million for cheating the National Health Service. I wonder what Vallance thought about that. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation also has a relationship with Pfizer, and to be honest with you, Pfizer's record isn't anything you'd want to boast about. If you work there, you'd want to keep quiet about it, I think, and say perhaps that you work for the tax people or rob banks for a living. So, for example, in the UK, Pfizer was fined £84.2 million for overcharging the NHS by 2,600%, and in the United States, Pfizer was hit with a $2.3 billion fine for mispromoting medicines and paying kickbacks to doctors. You might think that a foundation wanting to have a clean reputation might avoid relationships with companies like those. But Bill Gates doesn't seem to mind about all these little peccadillos, the cheating and the deceiving and so on. And in a way, why should he? He's got a team of PR people willing and able to make sure that his halo is constantly being repaired and polished, and I doubt if his many press and broadcasting partners will want to damage their financially advantageous relationship by mentioning anything which might cause embarrassment. After all, we mustn't forget that the foundation he shares with Melinda, Mrs. Gates, seems to me to have investments with much of the world's media, doling out fairly huge chunks of cash to no doubt grateful partners. Did I forget to mention that those two sanctimonious organisations, the BBC and the Guardian, are partners with the Gates Foundation? It cannot be that Gates isn't aware of the problems associated with vaccination because his own foundation has allegedly had its own little peccadillos to think about. I've described some of those controversies in other videos. In India, there was trouble over a Gates-funded vaccine program. A government investigation claimed the program, an observational study, violated the human rights of those being injected and failed to report properly adverse effects. That, as we've seen, is not entirely unusual drug company practice. A parliamentary investigation concluded that the Gates-funded Programme for Appropriate Technology in Health had been engaged in a scheme to help ensure healthy markets for GlaxoSmithKline and Merck, another drug company. An eminent Indian editor said, "It is shocking to see how an American organisation used surreptitious methods to establish itself in India." Another complaint was that Indians were used as guinea pigs. In Africa, a meningitis vaccine project funded by Gates led to reports of up to 500 children allegedly suffering seizures and convulsions and becoming paralysed. And back in India, it was reported that over 490,000 people developed paralysis as a result of the polio vaccine that was given. Remarkably and horrifyingly, it was claimed that 80% of polio cases were derived from the vaccine. There are complaints that the Gates Foundation has taken over public health for the benefit of big drug companies. The links between the Gates Foundation and other organisations and the pharmaceutical giants seem never-ending. Gates has long argued that the world is overpopulated, and to help further this end, the Gates Foundation is said to have funded Mary Stopes, an organisation which performs over 3 million abortions a year, and has also worked with a charity called Genuity, which is experimenting with a second trimester abortion trial in Africa. But it's vaccines which seem to interest Gates most, and despite all the known hazards, the enthusiastic Gates remains gung-ho about vaccines. He must know there are very real dangers with vaccines, but curiously that doesn't seem to worry him. I wonder if he really has any idea what he's talking about when he discusses vaccines. There seems to me to be very little awareness of the risk-benefit ratio. For example, I've seen an interview in which he agrees that if 7 billion people are vaccinated against the coronavirus, there could be 700,000 people damaged by the virus. There could be many deaths, but I don't think Mr. Gates likes to talk about that scenario. He says that there could be 700,000 people with side effects, and he dismisses this as though he's talking about a bit of soreness or a slight rash. Not necessarily so, Mr. Gates. I've been studying and writing about vaccines for 50 years, and the side effects from vaccination are often life-changing. It's perfectly possible, for example, that there could be 700,000 people with severe brain damage after the first tranche of the vaccination program has been completed. I wonder if Gates has any idea what a brain-damaged person looks like, how devastating it is, not just for them, but for their relatives. And of course the COVID-19 disease, the subject of the Gates determination for a global vaccine, has, as I keep reminding everyone, killed far fewer people than the ordinary flu can kill in the same sort of time period. What's all this about? Who's doing what for why, and who's profiting and how? Well, the drug companies are making money, loads of it. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is getting more control over global healthcare, and Bill and Melinda are becoming ever more powerful and ever more able to pursue whatever goals and agendas might be dear to them. And wherever they go, they're treated like royalty. And Bill Gates himself is said to be richer now than he was a decade ago. Indeed, during the decade of vaccines promoted by Gates, his personal worth is said to have doubled to over $100 billion. The bottom line, however, is that I can't help suspecting that if Gates hadn't made so much money and hadn't doled so much of it out to buy influence, everyone would laugh at him, ignore him, or dismiss him as a nutter. Is there a hidden agenda? How much does Gates' fear about overpopulation influence what he does? And how much does that family interest in eugenics affect the aims of the Gates Foundation? Many rich people do wonderful things with their money, but they do it without trying to change the world and without wanting to alter the way people live. Although Gates is a university dropout with no more medical degrees than your fridge, He is regarded as a saviour, and his views on vaccination are treated as though they've been carved in stone and handed down from on high. What Gates wants is what we get. It seems to me that Gates is ignorant, deluded, arrogant and enormously dangerous. In my view, he is doing and will do infinitely more harm than good. And the other half of this strange joke is that whereas, although I'm medically trained and have studied vaccines and vaccination for half a century, my questioning, cautious view, asking only for more medical or scientific evidence to be produced in support of the claims which are made, is regarded as unacceptable, and I'm the one libelled, demonised and dismissed as a nutter, targeted by trolls, demonised as too questioning and regarded as too dangerous to be allowed onto Facebook, lest I terrify the community with too many truths. Putting aside my scepticism and doubts about vaccination and my conviction after much research that vaccines are neither as safe nor as effective as we are assured by their ignorant supporters, I'm deeply concerned about the safety of any coronavirus vaccine. I feel that anyone who accepts a coronavirus vaccine as proposed or supported by Bill Gates or his foundation should perhaps be placed in protective care for their own protection. I pray that no parents will allow their children to be given a vaccine that has been hastily produced and has not been thoroughly tested. Those who believe in vaccination should demand that any vaccines are thoroughly tested for safety and efficiency and that all test results are made public. Still, there's a bright side to all this. When the inevitable biopic of Gates's life is made, I hope they'll use my title, Just a Little Prick. It seems so suitable for a man who appears to be dedicated to vaccinating the world. Thank you for watching An Old Man in a Chair, and thank you for all your support and encouragement. Please copy and share the videos on Twitter and Facebook and BitChute and other platforms. Let's spread the truth. If you'd like to put on a translation, that would be great. If my videos disappear, then please go to my website to find out where you can see them. The transcripts of all my videos, including the banned ones, are always on my website. If you do visit mainstream media, please put on a message asking other people to watch those videos to find the truth. This channel's not been monetized. I haven't authorized any advertising and there's no sponsorship. If you'd like to see more videos from me, then please subscribe to my channel because they're not always easy to find. Although it may feel like it at times, please remember you're not on your own. More and more people are waking up. I firmly believe that together we will win this fight. As far as I know, my health's okay. I try to avoid accidents and I'm not planning to commit suicide. I just thought I'd mention that. Thank you for watching An Old Man in a Chair.